This is about the prodigal son. I know his pastor gave me the prodigal son and Doubting Thomas, which are probably the two best known and most preached on lessons. Next month I got Doubting Thomas. I don't think she trusts me to do anything different. I don't know. But I'm doing some research on this, and I realized that this is the most famous parable of all. It's also the longest one. The gospel reading's about 27 minutes. It's most well known, and I'm trying to figure out what more to say. So I was trying to figure out which gospel lesson to read. I looked at all the different interpretations, the NIV and the NRS and all those, and I finally decided I would use Morgan's translation. And so the gospel, Luke 15, 1-3, 15, 11 to 32, there's a skip there. That's kind of important. It says, "Now the tax collectors and sinners were all gathering around to hear Jesus. But the Pharisees and the teachers of the law muttered, 'This man welcomes sinners and eats with them.' Then Jesus told them this parable. Once upon a time, there was a guy named Dad. That's the only name we know of him. And he had two sons, Walter and Bobby. They both worked on his farm. They worked very hard, and he thought everything was hunky-dory. Yeah, everything was hunky-dory. And he was fine with that. And one day, Bobby, being the fun-loving guy that anybody named Bobby would be, comes and says, "Dad, I want half my inheritance." Dad says, "I'm not dead yet." He says, "I know, but I'm going to get it eventually." Dad says, "All right." And he sold half of his land and gave it to Bobby. Well, sold half and gave the money to Bobby. Bobby said, "I'm out of here," and he went out. He's going to have a good time. And half your inheritance, if your dad is a big landowner, was probably a lot of money. So he went out, as Kathy said, to places unknown and places he shouldn't have been, and spent a lot of money. "Hey, I'll buy the drinks, and I'll do this," and wine, women, and song, and everything was great. It always comes back to bite you in the end, and it did. And he ran out of money, ran out of friends, ran out of food, and he was feeding the hogs. And that time, that was even a worse job than it sounds like, because pigs were unclean to Jews at that time. So it was a horrible, horrible job. And he didn't have enough food, and the fun Bobby was gone. And he said, "You know what? My dad's got servants who look better than me. I think I'll just suck it up and go back." He says, "I've sinned against Father. I've sinned against heaven." He said, "I am not worthy to be his son. I'm going to go back and ask him for a job." So he went back, and he gets inside of his house, and his dad sees him, runs up and says, "Son, you're back, you're back, you're back." And he went through the speech again. "I am not worthy. I have sinned against you and against heaven. Can I have a job?" "A job?" He says, "You are my son. You're back." And he says, can't compete with that. He says, "Let's get the ring, the robe. Let's kill the fatted calf. Let's have a big dance and party." And they had a dance party. Well, then Walter, who was, of course, out working like a good guy should do, heard the music. Comes up and says, "Dad, what's going on?" "Your brother's back. He was lost, and now he's alive. He's back." He said, "But Dad, I've been here the whole time. You never killed a fatted calf for me. We never had a dance, a party, not so much as like a pig, And he's back." He said, "I always love you. Everything I have of mine is yours." And Walter looked at me and said, "Well, we don't know, because that's the end of the story. We have no idea how that ended. Was Walter, did he stay ticked off? Did he run away, say, 'Give me my half of the money, I'm getting out of here'? Did he say, 'You're right, Bobby's a wonderful guy, he's just Bobby'?" We don't know what Walter did. I mean, the song, I honestly think the parable was so long, the people writing it down just got tired of writing, because we don't know what happened. It's the only one that doesn't have a moral of the story there. And so we don't know. Now what I'm going to do is go back to it, but I'm going to tell just the ending part from all 3 points of view. I'm going to start when Bobby's walking down the road. First, I'm going to be Dad. Okay, "Dad, how did it go?" He says, "Well, I was out there working the field, and I missed my son, Bobby, because I loved him. He's my son. And he was gone. And I grieve when he's gone. And I'm always looking up the road, just thinking, knowing he's never going to come home, but just hoping. And one day I saw a figure. There's lots of people on the road, but he's my son, and I could tell his walk. From a half mile away, I could tell his walk. And it was Bobby. And it was like he was alive again. And I ran to him and hugged him, and he started blubbering about how he was sorry. It didn't matter. He was home. He was my son. He was home. So we had a party. It was wonderful. It was wonderful. Walter didn't quite understand it, but my son was back. Okay, from Bobby's point of view. Well, I thought he was going to have a good time, women, wine. It was fun, and I just ran out of money, and I think I learned a lesson there. After all these years, I knew my father was a good man. I knew he loved me. I knew he would take me back. To this day, I'm not sure if I made that decision because I repented or if I just had no place else to go. I ask myself every day, did I make the decision for the right choice? Did I repent, or was I just hard up? I don't know. But I came home, and he greeted me like I was a long-lost son, which of course I was, I guess. And it was wonderful. It was nice to know that someone is always going to love me in every situation. Here's Walter. What in the heck is going on here? Okay, my brother, Bobby, who's always been a pain in the butt, he always has to do what he wants to do, and Dad still treats him just as good as he treats me. I work so hard. I do everything he wants me to do. And Bobby goes flitting off, spending everything and wasting time and doing all that. He comes back, and he's like he's a long-lost savior, and he treats him. And the worst part was, they didn't even invite me to the dance. I was out working in the fields. Did they at least say, hey, your brother's home, let's celebrate? No, I was out there working, and I heard the music. No one came and told me. I mean, I understand Bobby's back. That's great. It really is, but he could at least told me. I felt like Bobby was more important than me. I know he loves us all, but sometimes it doesn't seem that way. All right, now, I'm going to ask you a question, and you answer it in your mind. Okay, I've done this before. I can read your minds. All right. Kids in school, I think they really believe I can. I don't know. I'm going to ask you a question, and I want you to sync the answer to me. When you hear that story, and you've all heard it 150,000 times, who do you identify with? Okay, don't think it yet. When I say now, who do you identify? Do you identify with a father? Do you see yourself in his place? Do you see yourself in Bobby? Or do you see yourself in Walter? Or none of the above? Okay, you got it in mind? Ready? Now. Come on, some of you aren't. Come on. Cindy. Oh, okay, I got it. You're a girl being Bob. Okay, I got it. All right. Everybody, there's one more still wavering. All right, got it. Thank you. It's about what I expected. Some of you said, I'm Dad. And although I'm not quite sure which thoughts come from which people, I don't ever refine that well yet, I'm guessing the people who felt Dad or Mom were parents. Okay, the love of a child is different than the love of anyone else. You know that. And if your child would leave you or your child would rebel against you, most parents would welcome them back. But yet, I don't know. There would be some resentment on most of us, And I was a book that I didn't read. I heard the guy talking about it by Larry Elder called Dear Father, Dear Son. And it's kind of popular right now. And some 15-year-old kid, when he was 15, he said, I'm mad at my dad. I'm not going to talk to him. They lived in the same house for 3 more years. They never spoke for 10 years. Never. He moved away, didn't even know where his son was. Finally, one day, the son came back and said, I'm going to talk to my dad. I don't know if he'll talk to me or not. He came back to the guy's restaurant, sat in there. Dad didn't make a sound, didn't do anything. He said, Dad, I want to talk to you. He goes, I'm working. I'll be done in 2 hours. Wait here. He got off work. For 8 hours straight, they talked. He didn't know his father's story. He didn't know anything. They got back together. That's a nice story. That's very similar to this one. For every one of those, we all know the ones where the father or mother does not forgive that child. That is the person in this story, the dad in this story, has a love that most of us don't have. There was no resentment on Dad's part. He said, Bobby's back. In his mind, he wasn't, because I think all of us, at least I would be thinking, if Sarah did this, I can see Sarah doing that, taking off and coming back. And there'd be a little resentment. Why did she leave? Why did she do what she did? We're human. We see it that way. Okay, Bobby? Yeah, a few of you had Bobby. Okay. I'm guessing your life has been like that, or you've been gone. From either you left God, or you left your family, or you left something, and you came back and welcome back. That's a wonderful thing. Walter? Yeah, a few of us are Walter. I'm Walter all the way. I'm always ticked off when someone gets something that I think I deserve. It's a petty part of me. Jealousy is one of my best emotions. It shouldn't be, but it is. He came back. It's like, in fact, I always thought the point of the story was to tell it was all about Walter. I always thought this was a parable to scold people. Don't be like Walter. Don't be like him. That's what I thought the meaning of the parable was. Accept everyone, even if they're bad. And it's not the point of the story. But that's how I look at it. Ferris Bueller's Day Off, I was rooting against Ferris Bueller. I'm the only one in the world who was rooting against Ferris Bueller. He wasn't following the rules. He wasn't doing what he was supposed to do. Now, I don't always follow the rules. I know that. But yet, Ferris Bueller, I was mad at him. Maybe it's because I was a teacher. I don't know. And he was getting away with murder. I don't know. But Ferris Bueller was kind of like Bobby here. He had a day off, And I always thought the point was to scold us. It's not the point of the story. The point of this story, and you have to understand where it is. If you notice, there's a gap in this gospel. There's 2 verses, and there's like 20 empty verses. We come back in. In that time, Jesus told 2 other parables. One was about the shepherd who had 100 sheep and lost one of them, and he found that sheep. And the woman who had 10 coins lost one of them and found that coin. And in this one, the father had a son, and he lost him, and he found him. This parable is telling us that God rejoices when he finds you. So if you stray, or I stray, and you give up on God, you forget him, and like most of us do at some time, God's always going to take us back. And there will be joy in heaven when that happens. It doesn't mean, well, heck, I'm just going to mess around, because sometime I'll just say, God, take me back, and it'll be fine. It kind of reminds me of a story. When I was a kid, I wanted a bike, and I prayed every day for this bike. For a year, I prayed for this bike, never got the bike. So one day I said, heck, I'll just steal the bike, then ask for forgiveness. That seems to work. I didn't really steal a bike, okay, but there's a flaw in there somewhere. And the trouble is, we're looking at that doesn't make sense to me. Because I understand that point. I'll just steal and ask for forgiveness. I have trouble making complete sense of this. I will admit that. I have trouble making complete sense about how if I dedicate my life to God, and Teresa here just flits around and, doing whatever she's going to do, and then comes back and say, yeah, I think I was in God, I do love you. How come I don't get rewarded for that? And by the way, I know a lot of us think that. We think that in our personal lives, we think that in every part of our life, our professional life, we all have coworkers who screw off, and maybe you're one of those, but we all do. And you get mad when they're accepted just like you are. People in the church tend to do that. I've been an active member of this church forever, and this guy's flitting off, and should I accept him back? God does. God accepts us back. I'm not saying he gives us permission to go out and do whatever we want. I can't understand this. And the reason I can't understand this is because I'm looking at it through human filters. God doesn't look at it through those filters. I had a meeting recently with a guy, and everything I was saying, he was not listening to me. No matter what we said, he was not listening. And I finally said, you have filters, and you're filtering out what we said. And we all do that. If I tell Justin something, I tell Lou something, I tell you something, you're going to hear it 3 different ways. Because we all have life experiences, and we are going to filter that way. And we're all human, and we're going to filter the story through our human thoughts, emotions. God doesn't do that. So it doesn't make sense to me that he's going to love that wayward person and rejoice. I mean, if in the parable of the 100 sheep, he left those 99 sheep on guard while he went and found the one that had been lost. If I was one of those sheep, I would have been upset. He left me, and again, I would be Walter here. But God will love us all. And Jesus made great pains here to say that God's most joyful time is when someone who is lost is now found. It doesn't always make sense to me. But, God defies human behavior. He doesn't react like you and I, and thank God that he doesn't. It is impossible, I think, for humans to understand God's love, his forgiveness, and his grace. But it's there. And I think the moral of the story is it's never too late. If you've been, no matter what you've been doing, no matter how bad you are, no matter all the things in your heart that you're holding, and we all hold them, okay, and you think there's no way God could love me, and you don't want anyone else to know what they're there because there's no way they would love you. Well, maybe they wouldn't. But through it all, God will. And that's the moral of the story. Amen.